Now we're ready for the rules. These rules are from my model, which I have built around this technique. And I've put them together because I found over the years people understand these rules really clearly, and if they stick to them and utilize them, they have the best effect. And the great thing is there's only 5 rules, and the rules are quite simple. So let's get started. The first rule is this. Until you get better at the technique, you start every single sentence with the person you're having conflict with. The first rule is this. You start every single sentence The first rule is this. When you are engaging with the person that you're having conflict with, you start every sentence with the following words. So what you're saying is. As you become better at the technique, you can vary this. But keep it simple and don't confuse yourself initially. I want you just to stick with those words. So what you're saying is. A little bit later, I'll give you some more examples on how to use some other. A little later, I'll give you some more examples on how to change that around a little bit so it's not so repetitive. Rule number 2. Bear in mind, you cannot start the sentence with anything else or the technique will not work. This sentence, these words are how you open the door to begin the skill. They are very important. Rule number 2. Pick the message and deliver it back in detail. With this one, I'm going to give you an analogy. Try to imagine that you're in a game show and you're the contestant and the person you're having conflict with is on the panel and you have the game show host. Let's say there are 5 different prizes and the top prize is $1 million. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get the top prize. Now, as an example, and to make it a little bit easier to understand, I'm going to use something that's a little bit more extreme. But let's say that in order to have a chance at winning the $1 million prize, you have to complete a task. And the task is that you have to interpret the message from somebody. So in comes a big guy who's really angry and he runs up to your face and starts screaming at you, "I hate you. I want to kill you. I hate you. I want to kill you." Now, he's an actor and he looks fairly convincing and you're a little bit scared. Write down what you think his message was, and let's see how you go with getting the top prize. Okay, how did you go? Who wrote down that he was convincing and he looked like he wanted to kill me? So I put down, he wants to kill me. Okay, unfortunately, you're on the bottom tier of prizes here. What you have to remember is that we're kind of negatively influenced by social media, and we hear all these settings where people have and we hear all these instances where people have come under attack or terrorists have done this or that. That's not the real world. That is heavily, what we're hearing about are the exceptions. When we go outside our door, there's not killers waiting outside every corner. There's not terrorists putting bombs in bins. If we really want to think about it, more people are dying from lack of activity and diet than are ever killed through conflict and violence. So the chances that somebody who is expressing those words to you actually wants to kill you is almost negligible. Now, based on this information, maybe write down again the message that this guy is trying to communicate to you. Who said something like, I am really upset and frustrated and angry, and I blame you for what's happened in order to cause my frustration. Now you're getting really close to the top prize. Most of the time, when people say extreme things like this, they're not going to kill you. They're not going. The majority of times when most people are elevated to this extent, they don't want to kill you. They don't want to hurt you. They're trying to express their frustration, and they see you as the cause for it. And our automatic response is defense mode. Unfortunately, when the other person is so elevated, they don't want defense mode. They want to feel listened and understood. It's incredibly effective if your response to something like that is, I hear you. It's incredibly effective if your response to something like this is, so what you're saying is, you're incredibly frustrated and you're angry and you think I did something to cause that. Here's the part where most people stumble, and this is rule number 3. There's a slight caveat on this, which I'm going to explain in rule number 5, but for this purpose, with rule number 3, I want you to have this as a consideration. You do not, under any circumstances, give your own message. Now, to use the previous example, where you've said to this person that I see that you're fairly angry and you're fairly upset, and you think that I've done something to cause that. Let's say the person who is verbally attacking you says, let's say the person who's verbally attacking you responds with something like, that's right, I saw you scrape my car, or you ignored me, or I expected this and you didn't give it to me. An example of giving your own message back is something like this. Sorry, you misunderstood. I tried to do X or I tried to do Y. I didn't mean to. All these things are you giving your own message back. You have to be strong and refuse to do this. So in the example of the reply being, I expected these things from you and you didn't come through with them. I expected these things from you and you didn't come through with them. I'm really upset with you. You have to go back to rule number 1. So what you're saying is, you're upset that you had expectations that I was going to deliver something for you and you saw that that didn't happen, and now you're incredibly upset. And then you wait for the next reply and you interpret that message and you give it back. Are you getting the idea? You have to refuse to give your message. Rule number 4 is interlocked with rule number 3. This is the word that kills the technique. It destroys it, and I hear it all too often. It's a 3-letter word beginning with B, the word but. You can do incredibly great work for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You can be performing the technique beautifully. It can be working. But I guarantee you, as soon as you use this word but, you have a high chance of destroying all your good work. But means that you have stopped listening and your mouth is giving a message and the technique ends up being destroyed. So rule number 4, never use the word but. And here's the caveat. I explained before. It's rule number 5. The only message that you want to give back is this: I'm listening and I understand. You can change this second one slightly. If you don't understand, you say that. I'm listening, I think you're saying this, but I don't quite understand. Can you tell me more? Now, there's a couple of little things I want you to bear in mind when you're going through this process. If somebody asks you a question, then you have permission to give your message. Bear in mind, as soon as you try to give your message, it can escalate the person again, and you have to go back to rule number 1. The other thing I want you to bear in mind is that sometimes questions are not questions. And I'll give you another example of this. Well, you shouldn't have done this. This hurt me. This hurt my feelings. You tried to hurt my feelings, didn't you? That's more of a statement. So you have to listen out for these ones. And the way you respond to that is along the lines of, so what you're saying is that you don't trust my motives and you think I tried to hurt you. I understand. This is quite different to another type of question, which might be, well, where were you last night? I was waiting. And then you can say, I got held up with X, Y, or Z. Again, be prepared to have to begin the cycle again. And remember, And remember that all of these rules apply for every statement the other person makes. During the course of one conversation, the other person might have 100 sentences and you have to use this 100 times. Now we're going to elaborate slightly on the variations. If we look at, now we're going to elaborate slightly on the variations. Now we're going to elaborate slightly on the variations. For the random conflicts, there is usually only a few messages that a person is trying to convey. And they are something like, I don't like you, I'm upset with you, you made me angry, I'm not having a good day, I see you as representing the organization that I'm frustrated with. So the underlying themes are of blame and frustration and anger, or being upset. If you happen to be in a work situation where you're dealing with customers, and oftentimes, and you experience this kind of interaction regularly, then you can pre-arm yourself with responses which can help diffuse these situations. So for example, somebody rings up on the phone and their appointment was cancelled, or they expected a service and it didn't happen, or the equipment they ordered broke down, and they're furious. So they immediately launch into a kind of a personal attack. The first thing is that you have to appreciate that they're just frustrated and angry. It is incredibly powerful when you reflect this. So you start at rule number 1. So what you're saying is, you're incredibly upset, frustrated, and angry this morning, Mr. Smith, because of your expectations with the product and they not being met. That's it. As soon as you say, but don't scream at me, but don't shout at me, the person will escalate. And I'm going to talk about why a little bit later. Let's say you have a verbal confrontation directly. You use exactly the same system. So what you're saying is, you're very upset, you're very hurt, and you think that I'm responsible for this. I understand. That's it. And wait for the next response and repeat. The next response and repeat.